Bill Ayers, welcome to the Dispatch podcast.
Good to see you, Jamie. Thanks.
I saw that you were at one of the encampments, which is one of the reasons, or is the reason why I thought to have you on again for our continuing discussions. For those who haven't listened, we've recorded 2 episodes of my previous podcast, The Jamie Weinstein Show. But before I get to the encampment, I thought I'd ask you just about a little bit of breaking news over the last couple days. President Biden announced on CNN that he was going to withhold some weaponry from Israel if they went into Rafah. There's some debate whether they are already in Rafah or not. But I just wanted to ask you, as someone who was maybe the target audience for that, or at least you know people who might have been the target audience who may have voted for Biden in the past and are upset at his policy with Israel and Gaza. Would this make you, or anybody you know who is upset of what is going on, more likely to vote for Biden in November?
Well, you've already waded into an area that I have very little interest in and no expertise in. I'm not deeply involved in electoral politics in the first place. But secondly, the context in which Biden made this announcement is not aimed at me. I'm not the target audience, nor anyone I know the target audience. I assume you think that he made that. I'm assuming from the way you asked the question that you think he made that as a gesture to people who are appalled at the genocide going on in Gaza. I'm not sure if he did or he didn't. I don't know his motives, but I know for sure that it's inadequate, that we are witnessing a pre-announced genocide in Gaza, and it's going on and on and on. And it wouldn't be going on without U.S. cover, support, diplomatic cover, material support, military support. And so saying I'm going to suspend, or I'm going to, I think the U.S. position has moved, but it hasn't moved in any substantive way. The fact that they didn't veto a UN resolution calling for a ceasefire is remarkable, because vetoing their main approach. But all they did was abstain, and then the resolution passed. And so the UN is on record as calling for a ceasefire. That's important, useful. It's also true that the U.S. and Israel are not signatories to the World Criminal Court of Justice. And so even though that court has found a credible claim that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, it'll have no consequences for either the U.S. or Israel.
I think people from my previous interviews know my position on a lot of what you said of calling this a genocide. So I'm not here.
I don't know.
Well, I'm not here to. I actually want you to understand the encampments a little better. Is kind of the purpose I've had you on. I just point out that not that I hold the ICJ or the ICC in high regard, but would you say that there was a credible evidence? The lead prosecutor was just on British television saying that is not what their determination was. But
the court found that there was credible evidence.
She says that your interpretation, because they asked her that, is not the correct interpretation. It was merely to proceed. But we'll let people look that up.
There's enough evidence that they said the full-scale investigation into the charge of genocide is warranted. South Africa brought the claim. Ireland has joined that. Others have joined it. And whatever you think of it, of the International Court of Justice, the reality is that Israel pre-announced that they were going to commit genocide. That's not a question. You know that's true. The high government officials said,
I don't know. Bill, I want to begin just after the Rafah question.
Jamie, we can't talk about the encampments without noting that Israel claimed in the second week of October that they were going to allow no food, no water, no fuel, no medicines into Gaza. And they said it will become unlivable. A high government official, I believe it was the defense secretary, defense minister, said that Gaza will become unlivable and that those people are not human beings. They are animals. That was said. That's not a question. That's on the record.
No, that's actually distortion. He was referring to
Wait,
Hamas.
how is that a
But
distortion? I read these
Bill,
statements.
Bill, we've had extensive discussions of this. We've had an international law expert on. We've had the head of war studies at West Point, and we've had Mehdi Hassan on to have these back and forth. What I think you're interesting in is that you were at the encampments. You were someone who's there. So I want to ask you what you thought when you what the encampment was like when you went to the University of Chicago encampment, which I don't believe is there anymore, on April 29th. And what did you say to the students there?
Well, the encampment, I did go to the University of Chicago. I also went to the one at Columbia. I went to the one at NYU. I went to the one at Northwestern. So I've been to several encampments. They all have certain similarities. One is a spirit of love and generosity and inclusion. I participated in a Seder at one of the encampments. The idea that the media, puts out that it's somehow Jewish students and their allies versus Palestinian students and their allies is absolutely false. There's absolutely no truth to it. Every encampment I was at had a substantial number of Jewish students, many members of Jewish Voice for Peace. But to say they're somehow not real Jews, that the real Jews are all Zionists, is nonsense. Norman Finkelstein is Jewish. Nathan Thrall is Jewish. I mean, this is not debatable. That's true. And so you can't make a claim that it's Jewish kids against Arab kids. That's not what's going on. The encampments are sites of learning, sites of inquiry, sites of love. They asked me at the University of Chicago to say a word. I started by saying, I'm embarrassed to be speaking to you because I came here to learn, not to speak. But I did say, you, as is often the case, you as young people are bringing the issue of the day, the moral issue of the day, to the public consciousness. And you've done a remarkable job in just a matter of months in changing the narrative. And I believe that. I think that they have been extraordinary in raising an issue that people didn't want to hear. And frankly, in terms of mainstream media, still doesn't want, or in terms of the government, the political class still doesn't want to hear. But the message is hugely important. And the message is there is a genocide going on. Israel is committing genocide. The US is a full enabler and a full participant in that genocide. It must stop. And for these kids at the University of Chicago and elsewhere, they're also saying, divest, first of all, disclose, tell us where your investments are. Secondly, divest from genocide. That's not a radical demand. That's a sensible demand. And the kids have raised it. The shame of this moment is that university administrators have shown themselves to be kind of idiots and unable to give a strong-throated, full-throated defense of academic freedom. What you're witnessing at the University of Chicago and at Columbia and the other places I visited is a group of kids who want a conversation to go on. And that's really the right to learn is basic to academic freedom. What a smart university administrator would have done is said, you've raised an important issue. We can discuss it campus-wide for the next several days. That would be useful. Let's hear every side. Here you are at Columbia.
Wait, Bill, you went on for a little bit.
At Columbia, some of the foremost scholars of Middle Eastern history, of Arab history, of Palestinian history, and of Israeli history are there at Columbia. Why would you shut that down? That is education. They learned more in that encampment than they've learned in all the classes they took in the last year. Secondly, the encampment endangered no one. The encampments endangered
Bill,
no one.
we're going to get to all of that. So, you don't have to try to fit every question that I might have in one answer. My question to you to begin with is just more of a broad one. Do you think the protesters, these protesters or any protesters, have an unlimited right to take over a campus and, stop students from going certain places in the campus if they don't have their view? whether it's
No,
this.
no. You asked, do they have an unlimited right to take over the campus and prevent other students? No. And if you look at the Columbia encampment or the U Chicago encampment, there was nobody threatened and no one was prevented from going to classes. So why was it such an important, urgent issue that they cleared the encampment?
So just
They
time out.
endangered no one. They endangered no one.
So let me just be clear. I'm not getting to the endangering part. We'll talk about that later.
They weren't preventing people from going.
Are you saying that all the videos of people not being allowed to go through the encampment are not true? You're saying that they prevented no one from getting, through the encampment to go to class somewhere?
The encampment did not prevent anyone from going to class. I wasn't there every minute of the Columbia encampment, but in U Chicago, it's a corner of the quad. It's a small encampment, and yes, it looks different than the Gothic architecture of the rest of the campus, but they weren't preventing anybody. So what was the great fear?
Okay.
And why bring in the police? And now, if you go up to Columbia,
one second.
There are police guarding every entrance and every exit.
Let's go slowly.
That's American University.
Let's go slowly. That might have been your experience. There are dozens of videos showing people not being allowed to walk through the encampment if they don't believe they have certain views. So, it's hard for me to believe you're saying these encampments let anyone come in or walk through them. Is that what you're saying?
I have no idea about every encampment. I know that at the University of Chicago and at Columbia, no one was prevented from going to class.
So, Bill, they took
from going to class. Why freak out about it?
They did take over a building at Columbia, and they did.
Yeah, they took over a building after 100 people were arrested. Remember, the president of Columbia went to Congress, crawled on her belly across the congressional hearing floor, begged permission to please allow the university to exist. If I just fire a few professors and discipline the students, please, went back to Columbia, had the police come in and arrest over 100 people. And that led to the national scene that we see. It wouldn't have happened except that the University of Columbia, the Columbia University president was so ham-handed, so authoritarian, so eager to please these right-wing lunatics that she did all the wrong things. So that's when Hamilton Hall was taken over.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. I'm a bit confused. So you're saying that to the extent that they are now preventing people from going places, or they're preventing people from going to Hamilton Hall, it's because the police intervention. That's when this occurred.
The Hamilton Hall was taken over after the arrests. Yes. And then Hamilton Hall was cleared. Columbia is not back to normal. Why? Because you have police guarding every entrance. I tried to get into the University of Chicago campus. I'm a faculty member there. I had a faculty ID. I was not allowed in. The police are controlling these American universities. You must find that somewhat appalling.
I guess my question to you is: there are students
who find it appalling.
I don't follow it appalling.
You don't find it appalling?
No, I don't. No,
American
I don't.
Universities are being controlled by armed agents of the state.
No, what I find appalling is there are plenty of videos online of students just filming themselves and seemingly being harassed, often by non-students who are on campus. I guess my question: you don't believe Jews should feel unsafe, but it's clear that.
Wait a minute, I didn't say that. When you didn't even ask me that.
No, you said that you were in the encampment. You had a Seder, so you don't think that this should be a safety issue for Jews. You see it as inclusive.
The encampments are definitely not a safety issue. And let's make a distinction, Jamie. Being uncomfortable, being confronted with ideas you don't agree with, and being threatened are quite different things. And the idea that somehow the kids at the University of Chicago were threatening anybody, that's absolutely not true. That's untrue. Now, it is true that there's a very fierce anti-Zionist sentiment among a lot of students, many of them Jews. And so, to try to make it, the Jews are uncomfortable. No, the Jewish Voice for Peace kids in the encampment are very comfortable. Thank you very much. So don't claim that you're somehow speaking for the Jewish students. You're not.
Well, I'm not speaking for the Jewish students. I'm
You say
and
in
neither
part.
are you, and neither are you.
No, of
Um,
course not.
uh,
Of
uh,
course not. I'm
well,
saying
you
you're
are.
asking me.
I never claimed to be.
I'm not
You
claiming to be either. You asked me since I was at the encampment.
what
What did I say? I
percentage?
told you.
How many? What percentage of Jews do you think would consider themselves
I
Zionists?
have no idea in the country, but I know that it's a diminishing
No,
number, and I know among youth it's
it's
a very small number.
overwhelming. Overwhelming number of Jews consider themselves Zionists. So it seems, uh,
Zionist meaning
yeah,
what?
they believe that Israel has a right to exist as
Well,
a country.
that's not what Zionism is. But number one, but number two, um, to say that they're overwhelmingly Zionist is not. You don't. Let me just ask you this: you don't equate anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, do you?
Uh, Not a perfect circle, but pretty close.
Why is it pretty close? But when the idea that in order to be fully Jewish, you have to be Zionist, you have to believe
So,
that
but
the land from the river to the sea is somehow
yeah,
belongs to the Jews.
it's
That's not
it's
a
not
position
it's,
that
that's
many
not
people.
that's not the common Zionist view. Bill, uh, you mentioned though the safety issue, um, and that Jews are only uncomfortable. The Zionist Jews might be uncomfortable with ideas.
I did not say that. I didn't say
Then
only.
please,
I said there's a distinction between being uncomfortable and confronting ideas that are not
yeah,
that you don't agree with. There's a difference between that and being threatened.
yeah. So there is a video of one of the leaders of the Columbia encampment earlier this year in January saying Zionists should die. That they deserve to die. Um, is that something that you consider, you know, outrageous,
A
beyond
terrible
the pale?
a terrible statement, beyond the pale. Terrible. And I also saw him apologize for that statement, but it was a
Yeah.
terrible
Can
statement.
you imagine? Can you imagine any scenario where a any protest and any campus was led by somebody who, at some point, even if they apologize, saying black people should die or gay people should die? I mean, that would be considered ipso facto a problem if a protest had a leader who was calling for the death of people on
Oh,
campus.
absolutely. And of course, let's not forget what the issue is here. The thing that brought the encampments about has to do with the fact that the officials up in the highest levels of government in Israel have said Palestinians will die. They are animals, human animals. That's what's been said. It was pre-announced, and now it's happening.
You
Famine is happening.
you're
Hospitals are being
referring you're
bombed.
referring
Wait,
it's
hospitals are being bombed.
misinformation.
Three university presidents have been killed. Universities have been demolished. You talk about videos. I'm sure
You
you
are
saw the video.
Bill.
IDF, Jamie,
Slowly,
IDF
slowly.
forces.
Let's
I'll say
get
it
to all of it.
slowly if you let me.
We're going to get to all of it.
IDF
Um,
forces, IDF forces bombed a university, and then on video
we're,
filmed themselves saying, "Ha ha, the university's gone. You
yeah,
wanted an open university, now you have it." Is that beyond the pale,
yeah.
Jamie? Is that beyond the pale?
We will get to all of it, Bill.
Yes. Did you say yes?
No, I said we will
Okay, I
get to all of
assume you
it.
said yes.
Um, I want to point out you keep, I think, referring to the defense minister's statement when he was referring to Hamas in Israel, Gallant. So as he's referring to all Arabs or all
No,
Palestinian Arabs
no. He said
animals.
He said Gaza will be uninhabitable. He said that.
Yeah. Um,
And now you have all kinds of shady characters like Jared Kushner talking
yeah.
about real estate opportunities in Gaza, talking about settlements.
Let let
And
let
I'm sure
let me
you
ask
agree
you, Bill.
with me.
Bill, did you see
Settlement.
any signs at the encampment about the hostages?
Oh, there was a lot of discussion about the hostages, and my own view is that hostage taking is against international law. It's against international law when Israel does it. It's against international law if Hamas does it. It's against international law if the United States does it. And so, what's interesting when the hostage releases happen, that there's an exchange between a handful of hostages and hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians. Why is that? Because so many Palestinians are in Israeli prisons precisely for political
No,
crimes, and that's true, and you
no,
know it's true.
no. The answer to that is actually Hamas demands many more people, uh, usually criminals who committed murder, including. Excuse me. Do you realize that Sinwar, the leader in Gaza of Hamas, was someone that Israel released in a prisoner exchange? This wasn't an innocent hostage. He was a murderer.
I'm not sure what your point is. Is your point? I never said anything about supporting Hamas. I said, and now I want you to defend
No,
it. There's a
you,
pre-announced.
no,
There's a
you, no, no,
pre-announced
no.
genocide
What you said,
in
Bill,
Gaza, and you're not condemning.
what you
Am
tried
I
to
right?
compare, what you
Yeah.
tried to compare. I'm
Oh,
not condemning Israel's actions in Gaza. No.
you're not.
Uh, yeah,
So you're saying
but what's your no, no,
1,000
no, Bill? Wait, slow. What you said is what you tried to compare is the hostages that were taken on October 7th to the prisoners that Israel has in Israel. Did you not
deaths.
compare those two as
No, I did not.
hostages?
What I said is every Palestinian youth, practically man, has been in an Israeli prison. Why? Because it's an occupying force that sees the Palestinians as prisoners. I mean, as criminals, as enemies. Let me ask you quickly, and go slowly. I'm happy to go slowly. Killing 40,000 Palestinians, 60% women and children. Does that in any way make sense in terms of what's going on there? You must
Uh,
think that that's a little excessive. I mean, I
Frozen.
think I can go deeper myself, but just asking you, do you think that's excessive?
Sorry, Bill, you were frozen for a second, but I believe your question was, do I think 60,000 or 40,000 dead in Gaza, which do I think that is excessive? And you gave a percentage of the women and children. Is that correct? Was that your question?
Yeah, my question is, do you think the overwhelming assault on
Yeah.
hospitals, universities,
My
clinics
my my answer to my answer
is
my
excessive?
yeah my answer to you is first I would say this is an interview, not a debate, so I'm not trying to debate you. But I don't trust the numbers. I don't trust the composition of the numbers that you gave and who was Hamas. And we did have uh, John Spencer on, who is the head of urban warfare studies at West Point, who, according to his numbers, this has been one of the most remarkable operations in protecting civilians that he has
Uh,
seen.
well, that runs against
So
everybody else.
so
But
that
West Point,
no, it
I just
doesn't. It doesn't
West
actually.
Point,
It doesn't
West,
run against people that know
go slow,
war.
go slow.
Um,
West Point and the Pentagon are about as reliable as a cartoon character. They are not
right.
reliable sources. So I don't trust your sources at
Right.
all.
And I'm not here to debate the numbers here. That's not my interest in debating you, because you're not a military expert. I'm not a military expert. So, my numbers you don't trust. I don't think you are here to give great numbers either. What I
But
am
you do.
interested
But you do. Don't talk.
what I am interested though, Bill, is so you do critique Hamas. You do find it a vile genocidal organization.
I think Hamas is an authoritarian organization, and I think that if you look back, you'll see that a lot like Al Qaeda, these forces come into being when forces like the United States and Israel will not tolerate, for example, the PLO, and they made a point of destroying the PLO, and they tried to kill all the leadership of the PLO, and the alternative becomes something like Hamas, a more religiously dominated, more authoritarian organization. But this is not what the encampments are about. They're not about Hamas. And you were asking me about the
Well,
encampments.
well,
The
well,
encampments are
well,
about
well,
genocide. Wait, the encampments are about genocide.
Bill, but what I think is concerning to a lot of people is a lot of the leadership, one of which we just mentioned, um, uh, but even the broader leadership were parts of groups that didn't condemn October 7th, didn't condemn Hamas, didn't seem to have a problem with them, and now they're supposedly they're
Well,
organizing this humanitarian encampment. Does
well,
that not strike you as problematic?
first of all, you're wrong. But let me be clear
What am I
about
wrong about?
you're wrong that the leadership is pro Hamas. But let me be clear about my own views. The attack of October 7th was a terrorist attack, and it was wrong on many, many levels. One of the levels it was wrong on was kidnapping. One was killing civilians, which it did. But if killing civilians is wrong there, killing civilians is wrong here. If taking hostages is wrong there, it's wrong here. If Israel bombs a hospital and they claim, and they bombed all the hospitals, all the universities, they killed 107 journalists so far. They don't want anybody to see the dirty work that's going on. And if they claim it's wrong to bomb, if they're claiming, for example, that a hospital is cover, they're using it as human shields to cover Hamas fighters, then wouldn't it be okay if Tel Aviv hospital were treating IDF soldiers, that could be bombed, a legitimate target?
Bill, I don't think it's worthwhile to have the debate whether Hamas hides among civilians. It's an obvious fact. And if people disagree with it, that's fine. That's not why I'm having you on the show to debate that fact. But what I would think is useful and interesting is that I went through your Twitter timeline starting back in October 7th to now. And let me just read a little bit about what I discovered there. October 8th, you retweet someone saying Chicago is with Palestine. October 16th, retweets someone claiming that Israel is committing genocide. Retweeted on October 17th and 18th, 4 false claims about Israel bombing Al-Ala Hospital. October 20th, retweets this statement from Democracy Now! This language that the Israelis, the American officials, have been using to demonize Hamas has been entirely based in the effort to depoliticize the Palestinian struggle and to present any form of armed resistance against the violent apartheid regime as a form of terrorism. October 20th, you retweet a pro-Palestinian rally that has the slogan, Biden, Biden, you can't hide, we charge you with genocide. October 30th, you retweet a message from your podcast on Twitter calling what Israel is doing a genocide. A lot to deal with in that. That's not all your tweets, but I try to focus on the Israel related ones. My first question is to you, as someone who just said that you were appalled by the Hamas attacks on October 7th. Why not even one tweet speaking about the greatest attack on Jews since the Holocaust, and perhaps the most medieval attack I have ever witnessed and seen video of in my life? Nothing about October 7th and any sympathy for the Jews that were murdered there.
I have a lot of sympathy for the civilians who were murdered there, and I'm telling you plainly that the attack of October 7th was horrendous. Now, you quoted several times that I said that Israel is committing genocide. I want you to say that Israel is not committing genocide. When they announced that they were going to commit genocide, they are not letting supplies in. They are not letting food in. They are
Bill,
not.
how many people? How many? How many people are on the Gaza? How many people are in the Gaza Strip, roughly?
Well, there's something like 2.2 million people have lost their homes.
And Israel has a lot of bombs. Is that correct? A lot of power, a lot of military might, full control of the skies.
Absolutely.
If it wanted to kill more than 30,000 people, do you think it could?
I don't think genocide has anything to do with numbers. It has to do with intention, and it has to do with the tactics that you use. Bombing people's homes, bombing hospitals and universities, bombing clinics, bombing and burning museums. Are you aware of any genocide?
Are you aware of any genocide in history where the population supposedly being genocided has increased over time?
Absolutely.
Which one?
Vietnam.
The population increased during that period? During
Vietnam grew, and
it's not genocide. But
listen, it's not about numbers. That's what I'm saying. The U.S. went into Vietnam, and they intended to take whole areas and kill everybody, and they did. And they starved them, and they denied them medicines. That is genocide. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And
how would you, Bill, have responded to October 7th if you were Israel?
I'm not Israel, and
that seems to be the issue when we have people like you on the show. Is that
what are people like me?
Mehdi Hassan, people that
Mehdi
that
Hassan is like me. Number one. Number
with
two.
similar viewpoints
But
on
number
this
two.
issue. But
I,
let me. But you asked. I'm explaining. People like you. People who say, October 7th, yeah, that was bad, and now Israel is committing a genocide. And I asked them, how would you have responded? How could have Israel responded to
okay.
what they view as an existential threat?
Let
And
me,
it's always like, I have no idea. I'm not a military expert.
Go slow. I'll respond. What if I were Israel? I wouldn't have locked the Palestinians into the Gaza Strip in an open air prison for decades. I wouldn't have said, I think we have the right to steal your land in the West Bank and bring in settlements as much as we want. And by the way, we have a right to have an apartheid system, and we have roads
no answer.
for Arabs.
No answer how to respond to October 7th.
Wait,
That's
I'm
not
telling
an That's not an answer to how to respond to.
Okay, here's how I told you how I'd respond. I would respond by saying, we're ending apartheid. We're actually going to open up a democratic free society. You have the same rights we do. People are equal. We don't believe that some people are superior.
So you think the response? So Bill, you think the response to October 7th, where there were mass rapes, that parents were killed in front of their children, is to reduce the barriers to allow the potential for more October 7ths to occur?
Absolutely not. You're making that up. And I would add, you have a double standard, which I don't share with you. So it's okay. It's just horrifying that people were killed in October 7th. And it is. But it's not horrifying that apartment buildings are bombed when Israel has all the ability not to bomb that apartment building. They bomb it anyway. That's not horrifying to you. That's okay to you.
I'll explain what. I'll explain what you call a double standard. I believe there's a difference between a free society trying to fight a terror group that has assaulted its civilians in the most medieval of ways, and unfortunately, that terror group hides among civilians, hides under civilians, and they have no other way to do it than have to go into an urban zone, and there's a lot of collateral damage that occur. And the difference between a terror group, a medieval vision of the world, who calls for the annihilation of all Jews, who goes into a free and democratic society and jubilantly murders civilians. But that actually leads me to another tweet.
Jamie, don't go from thing to thing. Go a little slow.
I'm not trying to debate you, Bill. That's not the point. I'm interested in your perspective.
You are debating me. So you talked about a terror group. Can a state be terrorist? Can a state commit terrorism? Or is it only individual groups?
So here's what I'm going to.
The United States have committed terrorism in Vietnam?
Can I say this, Bill?
Wait, did the United States commit terrorism against Native population?
Let me respond this way. I mentioned earlier that we've had 2 podcasts. We actually have also had an email exchange where this exact topic came up, and you wanted to do the define terrorism thing. I encourage people to go read it. We'll link to it here on the site. It's a back and forth. I think it will also show a little bit of dishonesty there on your part, but I encourage people to go read that email exchange that I had with Bill on this very topic, where he asked me this very question and we went back and forth. But I wanted to ask you to continue the questions about the tweets. You also retweeted an article in that period on October 19th by Stephen Salita, called A Practical Appraisal of Palestinian Violence. In the article, he writes, there is no such thing as Israeli self-defense. It is a categorical impossibility. He actually goes on to make the case that in many ways, we should be jubilant about what occurred on October 7th, because it was a people rising up. Why would you retweet an article like that? It sounds like, from what you're saying, you weren't jubilant on October 7th. Why would you tweet an article?
You were frozen, Jamie. You were frozen for quite a while there. You might want to go back and start.
Sure.
You mentioned Stephen Salita, and then
you retweeted an article on October 19th by Stephen Salita, called A Practical Appraisal for Palestinian Violence, in which he writes, "There is no such thing as Israeli self-defense. It is a categorical impossibility," and goes on to make the case that there was reason for people to be jubilant on October 7th because it's a people rising up and returning to their homes, what he was referring to as the great massacre that occurred on October 7th. Is that I mean, it sounded like you saying you weren't jubilant on October 7th and you were upset about it, but
No, I
you're
wasn't.
tweeting an article talking about how jubilant that day was.
Well, I wasn't jubilant, but I have my own views, but I think Stephen Salida is a voice that's important to listen to. He was the person who was drummed out of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. But the reason that that's worth listening to and thinking about is that whenever you call Israel a free and democratic society, which is if it weren't laughable, it's at least a stretch.
Have you ever
Israel
been there?
is not.
Have you ever
It's
been
not
there?
free.
Have
Yes,
you been there?
it's not free. It's not free. Wait, it's not free. It's not democratic. It's a settler colonial project. That means that the people who've been subjected to ethnic cleansing, to ghettoization, to apartheid, do have a responsibility to struggle back. And that's why if you go to any settler colonial system in the world, and you will see fightbacks happening on many levels. Boycotts. I know the violence is appalling. I think it's appalling, but that means you could at least support the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. That wasn't violent. You could at least support the first Intifada. That wasn't violent.
Did you say you've been to Israel?
I tried to get to Israel. Actually, I was in Egypt, and
So
I couldn't get to Israel because I was on a peace delegation.
Anybody who's been to Israel and gone to the Tel Aviv beaches will see Arabs and Muslims and Jews enjoying the beaches side by side. In the previous government before Netanyahu, there were Arab Muslims in the cabinet. There has been Arab members of the Supreme Court, Arab Muslims. The idea that Israel is not a free and open society where anybody can speak their mind and criticize the government, which they do.
Yeah, anybody absolutely. Can speak their mind and criticize the government, I think you're wrong. And I think, have you read?
Then you know nothing really about Israel.
I think you know nothing myself, but Ta-Nehisi Coates went to Israel last year, and he came away saying, people said it was complicated. It's not complicated. I know what apartheid looks like. I know what Jim Crow looks like. This is what it looks like. And you can say, look, they had an Arab minister in the cabinet. That is completely absurd in terms of saying there is therefore no apartheid. Why is there
maybe you should
wall around a ghetto in Jerusalem? Why is one road for Jews and one road for Arabs? Why?
Bill, do you actually not understand the wall and the fence? Are you unfamiliar with this?
I do understand. I understand what ghettoization looks like. Okay. Let me ask you a quick question.
No, because you seem like such the expert here. Do you know why?
I am not an expert, Jamie.
No, but you just mentioned the wall. So let's get to it. Because I'd like to press you on it. Do you know why there's a difference between fence and wall, and in the small sections there is wall?
Have you read?
It's usually you don't know, but it's usually because the fence which protects Israel from suicide bombings. It's along a road, so you can't sniper in. That's in the small sections. There's wall. That's usually right. There's a reason there's wall instead of fence, which is the overwhelming case on the border between the West Bank and Gaza.
Let me ask you two quick questions. Go slowly. Two quick questions. Have you read Nathan Thrall's book, A Day in the Life of Abed Salama?
Yeah, we're not going to go through reading this. I could go. Have you read this book? Have you read that?
No, I'm just asking that.
What is the point you're trying to make?
The point I'm trying to make is Israel is an apartheid society, and you know it, and people don't want to face it. So take the question of settlements. You support the settlements in the West Bank.
Yeah. So Bill, it's a preposterous libel, calling it apartheid state.
Well,
it's also questionable, and I still find it bizarre, and I still haven't got quite an answer. Despite you saying here that you were horrified or upset about October 7th, I see why not a single tweet in all your tweets about genocide about this is a horrible thing. I condemn it.
Israel is
You immediately begin tweeting, "I stand with Palestine."
well. I think it's important to say that
The day
Israel,
after the greatest attack on Jews since the Holocaust.
the day after Israel announced that they were going to commit genocide, and they did, and they are, and that's the key thing that has to stay centered. I think that what happened on October 7th was despicable, and I think if it's despicable for one group, it's despicable for the other group. And you won't say that. You're saying it was an existential threat to the Israeli state. How about the existential threat to the Palestinian people?
I'm not so sure.
Which has been grinding on for 70 years. How about that?
I mean, I hear a lot of people often say, later on, oh, it was so horrible October 7th, and yet, their immediate reaction was tweeting things not in support of the people that were massacred, but the opposite. So, do you regret, just to finish on the tweets, do you regret retweeting 4 times about an attack on the, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, the Al-Hila hospital, which was not perpetrated by Israel? You have those still up.
No, it was perpetrated by Israel. And so we don't agree on those facts.
Not according to
the
best analysis of it. The numbers that were reported at the time.
It was despicable what happened on October 7th. You think it's despicable that they're bombing hospitals, universities, killing university presidents, and apartment complexes and so on. That's despicable to you, right?
I abhor the deliberately targeting of civilians, which Israel does not do. And if they do it, there's usually accountability.
Why government officials say we're going to do it? They said that.
That's not what they said.
Everyone should get out of the north and go to Rafah. And everyone went there, and now they're saying we're going to bomb you there.
Yeah, it's because that's Hamas's last stronghold now.
And so when it's over, what then? What do you think Israel will do then?
Well, I think they're going to try to allow Palestinian society to rebuild if they're able to kill Hamas, but they're going to protect themselves. They're not going to allow visas to go into Israel like they were doing beforehand. Not after October 7th.
What's amazing, what's great about this moment, and what's wonderful about the encampments is they're ripping the mask off this idea that there's a free and democratic society in Israel. It's not free. It's not democratic. It's apartheid. It's settler colonialism. It's also a national project. But you must admit. I mean,
it's funny. You think you repeat these like slogans and you think you make it true.
You're repeating.
Anybody who's been to Israel knows it's a free and open society, and anybody like I have who've been to societies that aren't free and open can tell right away they're not free and open.
Ta-Nehisi Coates wasn't in Israel. He doesn't agree with you.
I haven't seen what Ta-Nehisi said. He was able to say whatever he wanted in Israel, I'm sure.
It's not a question of can you say anything? Can you do anything? For example, you know for sure that in 1948 Haifa was ethnically cleansed. You know that. That's not a question. That's not a mystery.
I have zero interest to go into a Benny Morris style debate on how the refugees came to be. I've done that many times in my life, but that is not what I think the point of having you on is. Here's
and one of the things that I think
Bill, one final question on the Salida article, because I think it's relevant. He also denies the mass rape that occurred on October 7th.
I don't think we know the facts on that yet. I don't think we know the facts. You cannot. You're pointing out that you can't trust Hamas as an authority. I agree. You cannot trust the IDF. They are liars. They're paid to lie.
These aren't from the IDF. These are accounts of people that witnessed it.
I'm saying
even look at this. I printed this out. I'm not a big fan of the UN, nor am I a fan of Al Jazeera. But Al Jazeera wrote the article about the UN report saying there's credible grounds to believe that there were sexual assaults, and they may still be continuing with the hostages in Gaza.
It could well be. I mean, it could well be. And to the extent that it happened, it's a horror. I agree with you on that. Now, you mentioned Al Jazeera. You must find it appalling that Al Jazeera has been banned from Gaza. Do you find that appalling?
I think Al Jazeera is an arm of Qatar. But to answer your question more thoroughly, though, There's a lot of things that happen in free societies that I don't support. I do not support, for instance, in Europe, that the Holocaust is an imprisonable offense. I do not support that, but I still believe that the countries in Europe that have that are free and open societies. So if you're asking me, in Israel, are there policies that I disagree with? I am sure that I can come up with some policies that I disagree with. But I disagree with places, free and open societies all the time. But they are in a different category, than fear closed societies.
It's like the United States. Let's just take the United States at the turn of the last century. It's a free and open society, except for Black people, except for indigenous people.
I mean, are you asking me to respond to that?
No, I'm not. So it was a free and open society, except for some. Israel is a free and open society for some and not for others. Ethnic cleansing is going on to this day.
Who is it not an open society for? Because it is an open society for the Arab population that lives within Israel. Are you talking about the West Bank and Gaza? Or are you talking about the Arabs within Israel?
I'm talking about both, the West Bank and Gaza and people in Israel. I had a long talk with Fida Jariz, who lives in the Galilee. She described discrimination, humiliation, access to jobs, access to education that were denied to her. So yes, it's not a free and open society for everyone. It's an apartheid society, which means it's a segregated society, which means there are some people who are more equal than others. That's something that I oppose. And I oppose it in the United States, and I oppose it there. The United States also is a settler colonial society. And it also has a history of ethnic cleansing and of mass murder. We did that. That's our history. We can face that and still move forward. Before you Israel and forward.
If you're asking, is there discrimination within Israel? There's discrimination within every society. So I am not shocked that an Arab Muslim in Israel can point to appears as discrimination, but there is not discrimination by law, which would be what you're referring to in apartheid regime. And again, there are more rights for the Arabs in Israel, the Arab Muslims in Israel, than any society throughout the entire Arab world. It's actually pretty incredible that if you want the most rights, if you're an Arab Muslim in the Middle East, you have to be living in Israel. Do you disagree with that?
You're asking me then to defend places like Saudi Arabia, another U.S. client. Absolutely not. I think the discrimination and oppression in authoritarian societies is horrible. But I think you're making a fantasy when you pretend that there's full equality between Arabs and Jews in Israel. It's just not true. And there are many, many examples. But I urge you to read Nathan Thrall, a Jew from Jerusalem, who's honest and tells the truth about what apartheid looks like in a particular family and a particular incident in a particular road in Jerusalem.
Are the honest Jews the one that agree with you? Is that why he's honest?
I didn't say that. I said he's an honest person.
You said he's a Jew and he's honest.
You were saying, I think he is an honest person. He just won the Pulitzer Prize for his book, A Day in the Life of Abed Salama. I urge you to read it, to open your mind and see what life looks like from the bottom up.
I'm going to go to a couple final questions. But before I do, can you understand why someone might be skeptical that you really had such sympathy on October 7th that you're expressing now, when you have no sympathy in your public forum, and that you immediately are calling Israel committing genocide? I mean, it seems discordant.
Well, it's not discordant to anybody who knows me, because I'm against terrorism and always have been. And I think that those kinds of acts, I think kidnapping people is not only against international law, but it's a horror for human beings. It should not be done. And I condemn it when anyone does it.
And what evidence would it take you to believe that there were rapes? Why is that something that you're not?
I did not deny it. I said, I don't think the evidence is all in on which are inflated claims and which aren't. I mean, again, the IDF has put out a lot of stuff that turns out not to be true. And they claim they're protecting civilians. That's just flatly not true. And you can You can see it in all the reports that are coming through on social media. One of the reasons that Israel will not allow media to come into Gaza is it doesn't want witnesses to what's going on. Sadly for them, witnesses are already there with their cell phones, with their video cameras, and we know what's going on. Believe what you see with your eyes.
Oh, I encourage people. I think we talked that earlier with the videos on college campus. Believe the things that you're seeing with your eyes, not necessarily
And also
what you're telling people.
don't believe the things that when somebody is an official embedded with an army, don't believe those things, because those things are manufactured.
Do you think Israel has a right to exist?
Israel does exist, and the United States and Israel both have a right to exist, and people have a right to transform them and to make them the free and open societies they ought to be.
Why do you think?
Everyone.
Why do you think what you're calling for is a one-state solution, I think, right?
I'm not calling for a one-state solution. I'm calling for equality. Are you calling for a one-state solution or a two-state solution? Do you believe in a two-state solution?
Oh, I do. I think it's farther away now, but I don't believe so.
Why was that dropped from any discussion for the last 15 or 20 years, and suddenly people are pulling it out of a bag and say, let's have two states?
Raising my hand here. I can answer your question, Professor. I can answer your question, Professor.
Jamie,
the reason why I'm answering your question. The reason why is because the Palestinian Arabs have repeatedly rejected it. As late as 2008, 2009 with Ehud Omar. I mean,
you froze, but here's the problem with what you're saying. Does a state, when you say a two-state solution, does a state mean sovereignty? Does it mean its own security forces and its own borders, or does it mean something under the thumb of a bigger power?
Here's my question to you. What it will mean, if that's what you're asking, it will mean something that will not threaten Israel. Israel will not allow a state that will come next to it, a Hamasistan next to its border with full capabilities to destroy it. And I think that's understandable. And I think what you proposed earlier is this idea that everyone votes within the territory. Full equality, I think, is what you're referring it to.
I said full equality, absolutely.
Would be the end of Israel, because there is no democracy.
In what sense would it be the end of Israel? You mean it would be the end of an ethno-state?
No, I think what it would be is mass massacre of Jews in the territory.
I don't believe that for a minute. We've seen mass massacre of Palestinians right now in real time in front of you. You should be able to condemn that.
What you see in real time is a state that has 20% Arab Muslim population, and there is not mass massacres. It's an opportunity for people of all sectors to achieve their highest aspirations. Let me just close on this. You were a professor of education at the University of Chicago. I wonder myself, and obviously you disagree with this designation, how we got to a point where we have people on campus who, like the kid at Columbia, is calling for the death of Zionists. People the days after October 7th signing on to statements that are effectively pro-Hamas.
That's bullshit.
It's not bullshit. The people, literally, the woman from New York University.
Me? Oh, I thought you were referring to me. No.
Yeah.
No, when I said bullshit, I thought you were referring to that I somehow supported Hamas, which I don't. But what were you? What does professors of education are pushing on to be taught in academic programs? I myself have seen the schools in DC, the elite schools, and I rush to take my kids out of them because they seem to have gone off the rails. I wonder. I guess my question is, I wonder if there is a correlation between what is being taught in these schools and what we're getting on college campuses now. And as someone who probably pushed a lot of stuff that I don't think is probably very good to be taught in schools, is there a correlation between what you thought should be taught in early elementary schools and what we're seeing on campuses today? I can't quite follow your logic, but let me make one correction. I was not a professor at the University of Chicago. I've been adjuncting at the University of Chicago for 15 years.
Sorry, University of Illinois, Chicago.
University of Illinois, Chicago. Not that elite private university, but a good public school. the question that you're asking has something to do with the content of teaching, and you said, have you pushed certain agendas and so on? No, I don't. I think that you're making a fundamental misunderstanding. When the Congress called these university presidents before them, everyone misunderstood, I think, what the function of the university is. And I was really disheartened by the testimony of the elite university presidents, and then horrified by the president of Columbia University. The function of a university is to protect the right to teach and the right to learn. And that protection is not guaranteed by the government. In fact, when the government interferes with what's taught in schools, we are on very, very treacherous grounds. The way that universities function is they are policed, and they're policed by their peers. Faculty governance, which is in many ways not fully realized, but faculty governance means that you can only publish if peers think that your publications are worth discussing, worth debating. You can only teach if your peers think you're worthy of participating in the kind of intellectual exchange that a university is based on. That's why we should keep, the congressional committees and the governors and everybody else out of public education, out of higher education. Academic freedom means the right to teach and the right to learn. That is being eroded, and it's eroded every time Congress thinks they can score points by dragging academics in front of them and scolding them for what they do. No, I don't see any link between what is taught. You said what is taught in early education. What's taught in early education is working with paints, building a sense of agency, building with blocks, reading books. That's what's taught in early education.
I guess I'll pull on this thread a little bit, and it goes back to a little bit what we discussed earlier. What no one, I mean, I haven't seen any criticism of what is being taught necessarily, or what's going on campus right now, stopping hearing ideas. It's the taking over of a campus square and not letting people through or feeling threatening. I don't understand what you're talking about. All these professors who are coming and saying in Columbia and standing up with the students, they're teaching their courses. No one's really, I'm not sure they should have been hired, some of them, but no one's calling for them to be fired. So I'm a little confused about this idea.
Whoa. Wait, you're wrong. The Congressional Committee did call on the president of Columbia University to fire 2 professors. It did. That's what it did. And when you say there's some things you shouldn't be taught, well, that's not up to you, and it's not up to the government.
Who said some things shouldn't be taught? I didn't say that.
Some things should not be taught. You just said that.
No, I didn't say that. What
you said? I disagree with some of the things that are being taught.
Well, I know. I said I disagree
okay.
with the worldview that these professors are teaching, and I'm not sure I would have hired them because
What worldview do you disagree with? Whose, for example?
Basically, everything you've espoused here, but I agree with their
espousing being against genocide.
I agree with their right to say it. I went to many universities where my voice was the lone voice at the university. To the extent that the idea that you're saying that these ideas are being censored seems preposterous. And I don't understand. Do you see a difference between preventing people from using the school and if a mass number of students feel uncomfortable at the school not because of the ideas, but because sections of the campus are cordoned off and created these, I don't know what you would call them, these villages? Do you see a difference between those two things?
You're fundamentally wrong that people were prevented from going to classes. That never happened at the University of Chicago.
Are you using semantics? Are you saying they're allowed to go a different way to classes? Or are they allowed to go through the encampment?
I don't know what the setup was at Columbia. At the University of Chicago, the students had a corner of the quad. No one was prevented from, maybe you're saying they couldn't go through there and, shout what they believed. I don't know. But the truth is, people were not prevented. So the idea that these were violent, then you say large numbers of people are uncomfortable. Going to the university is an exercise in uncomfortableness. I always felt that in my classes, everyone should be uncomfortable all the time, mostly me. I should be uncomfortable because my ideas should be being challenged. And that's what I think a university is for. So discomfort is a kind of a squishy kind of
Yeah,
a
Bill. When you say this to a conservative who has been on college campuses, elite college campuses like me, we are the ones who were the minority in our view. We were regularly challenged, so I have no problem with
Oh,
discomfort. That
that's
was
what
the nature of the
I
university.
loved it.
But
I
but
loved it when they had a very
but I don't think
conservative.
there's not much discomfort going on campuses, not because of this, but because of the kind of the monolith of thought that the professors embody.
Wait a minute. What's the monolith of thought in the university you went to?
I think all universities have overwhelmingly left of center faculty to the far left of center faculty, and to not believe that is to not believe obviousness. But I mean, I don't feel like debating there. Actually,
Once again, the university is in the business of policing itself, as it should be, and that means that if I write something and I submit it to a journal, to an academic journal, it's refereed by my peers. That's what should happen. I don't want Elaine Stefanik refereeing my stuff. I don't want you refereeing it. The idea is, just as lawyers and just as doctors police themselves, we also have the responsibility to police ourselves. So we have open debate. And I love it when I have a reactionary student like you come into my class, because I then get to have a real discussion and show people that we can have profound differences without coming to blows, without censoring, without ad hominem attacks. We can do that. And I think that's an important lesson for people who live in a free and open society.
well, I don't think the issue on college campuses are Middle Eastern studies departments being too pro-Israel. I don't think that is
There are
ever been an
many,
issue.
there are many professors who are pro-Israel. Let's take Columbia as an example.
Not in many Middle Eastern departments, Bill.
Well,
That is not a very common stance for most Middle Eastern professors in Middle Eastern studies departments.
Well, maybe they've looked into the issue and they know more than you. I don't know. But the point I'm making is that you look at what happened at Columbia and the sequence of events. The sequence of events is very quickly, in early October, Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace were banned from the campus. Shortly after that, putting up posters was banned. That's unbelievable to me that happened at Columbia. And then comes the encampment. It didn't precede that. It came after that.
Yeah.
So the university would not allow free expression and free discussion, would not allow groups to function, and they shut it down. That kind of authoritarianism leads to a reaction. The encampments was that reaction.
Final question, and I don't know if this is something you want to discuss, but since I have you here, your adopted son was the DA in San Francisco. He was recalled. There's a big debate in this country about the type of, philosophy that he had versus not. What do you make of the pendulum swinging, it seems, back for more tough on crime policies? And what did you make of your son's job in San Francisco? Do you think San Francisco is better off today than it was before he was DA?
My adopted son, Chesa Boudin, is an extraordinary scholar, a Rhodes Scholar, a graduate of Yale Law School. He was a public defender for many years, and then he decided to run for district attorney, for those who don't know. And he won. He won a very closely contested election. And he did, in his 2 years in office, exactly what he said he would do. He abolished cash bail, which is nothing but a tax on poor people. He abolished cash bail. He set up a unit to investigate wage theft, which is a greater crime in this country than all the burglaries and robberies and car thefts put together. He indicted a couple of police officers for murder, unprecedented. And 2 days after he was elected, because he promised to do these things, a recall effort started. And whereas in the election, there are limits to how much can be spent, in the recall, you can spend anything you want. And in the recall, you're running up or down. Chesa Boudin, yes. Chesa Boudin, no. In an election, you're running against somebody. He was recalled. And he decided, I think wisely, to take a year off and take care of his child. Now he he's moved on from that. But do I think San Francisco is better or worse off? I have no way of judging. But I think his policies were sensible. I do. I don't know anything about the pendulum swinging, but I do know that we have 2.2 million people incarcerated in this country. It's a giant gulag stretching the length and breadth of the country. I do know that the students I teach at Stateville Prison are all doing death by incarceration. That is, they have no pathway to ever being freed, even though that many of them were arrested at 17, 18, 19. That to me is a cruel and unjust system. And we ought to be reforming our criminal legal system for sure. That's not what I teach in my education classes, but that's what I believe.
Bill, thank you for joining the Dispatch podcast.
Jamie, always a pleasure.